First thing, I'm just going to apply a thin layer of glue onto the shank of the hook, just to keep everything nice and steady and strong. Take the thread up so it's roughly in line with the barb and snip. I've got this pair of small lead eyes. You can use medium as well. Small tends to be my standard for this size of flexo. Just tying that into the middle of the shank, seating that nice and firmly. Okay, and I'm just taking the thread back to where I started, cutting my length of flexo tubing. This length is roughly about an inch and a half long. Better to make it longer to start with than too short and have to cut again. Can be quite awkward stuff to tie in. So I'm going to apply a layer of glue to the point that I tie it in to be able to seat it nice and firmly. Slide over the top, pinch. This you really do need to put quite a lot of pressure on. And just whip finish over the top. Pull that nice and tight. So now I've tied that in, I'm just going to whip finish over the top. You do need to put quite a lot of pressure on just to make sure that stays seated and this flexo material doesn't spin around the hook. Okay, that's one side done. So this is certainly the more tricky side to tie in. I'm going to start by just pushing it to form the shape of the body. I'm pinching with my right hand, holding the bobbin now with my wrong hand, my opposite hand, and just tightening it, tightening that flexo material onto the hook. It is certainly not held in at this point. Do take quite a few turns. This will be tidied up a little later. Just for a change, super glue. This I put onto the thread. And this is really what helps to seat that material and allows me to tighten the thread properly. So I could tie off there. It's going to look a little messy because there's quite a lot of thread around where I've tied in. So now I just take my tag end and actually unravel a little of that thread just to neaten up. This is where the super glue's done a great job of just holding everything together. Take off my tag end, and now I'm just really checking the shape of the body. Okay, looking good. As with before, quick whip finish. Great thing about this Veevus thread is you really can put quite a lot of pressure on. Okay, I'm happy with that body shape. That's all really how I would like it. I don't like the bodies too big on Flexo crabs. The bigger the body, the louder the splash when it hits the water, and the slower it's going to sink. And now I'm just going to trim this extra material. Really trying to get it as close to the thread as possible. This side I'm going to take off and trim like this because it's a lot easier. Now you could just leave it like that. I'm just going to singe the tips, makes it look a lot neater. It's a pretty high risk strategy. I've certainly set a few of these on fire before. So a quick layer of super glue across each bit of thread. That's really the tying part of the Flexo done. Now for the construction stage. So I'm going to start with my chenille, my micro chenille. You'll see this is on a piece of card and there's a natural bend to a lot of the chenille. I really like to use this bend to make sure the legs aren't completely straight. I think it fishes much better and looks far more realistic. To the body there's a slightly flatter side and a slightly thinner side. The fatter side I'm going to use for the eyes. It just looks a bit more realistic. One thing that makes tying in with chenille much easier is a large needle. So I'm going to tie 3 legs in and then the claws. Just pop that chenille through the needle. So you can see I've got these bits of legs that are nice and bendy, they've got a nice curve to them. Just going to snip that to size. The middle leg I normally have the longest as a crab would. So one thing with the legs, just before I go any further, that's extremely important is firstly you really want a Flexo Crab swimming with a hook side up. With these chenille legs, if you tie them on this side of the shank, it's always going to swim hook side down, even if you've got big dumbbell eyes. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong, is they don't tie the chenille this side of the shank. That's going to ensure that the fly is certainly going to fish properly. If the fly is swimming hook side down, it's going to catch all of the coral, all of the turtle grass, and going to cause a lot of aggro. So just to the end of the legs, just going to singe off just the very tips. This only requires just a dab with the lighter. Gives a nice little taper to the legs. Dab with the lighter again. So that's really the kind of shape I'm looking for with those legs, with those crab legs. Not too long, just nice and in proportion. And you can see I've got a bit of curve to the legs. It looks, I think, nice and crabby. Making the claws, I've got quite a nice long length of chenille. Makes working much easier. I'm just going to thread that through the eye, as I did with the legs. There we go. Thread it so it's basically folded in half, and then I'm going to stick that needle through the Flexo material, and you want the chenille evenly spaced. And now I'm just going to tie a knot this side to start with. These thin nose tweezers make life much easier for tying this overhand knot. Still rather fiddly business. There's my overhand, tighten that up. I'm just going to snip this other end where the needle is. And I've just pulled it through to where that other overhand knot is, just to give myself more space to tie the overhand on the other side. Those are my claws. Trim those a touch more. Same as before, quick dab with the lighter. So you can see that's already starting to take a nice crabby shape. Now, just to secure everything in place, all of the chenille in place, a lot of people use super glue. The problem with that is when you're fishing, because super glue is very brittle, it cracks the chenille quite quickly. I'm using this Solarez Flex formula, which is a UV glue, and it certainly helps to stop the chenille from cracking and allows for a bit of movement with the legs. So with this glue, I actually want to put the glue not roughly, so I've got, I think, about 4 or 5 millimeters of glue from the base of the leg. That's just to help stiffen the leg, otherwise they fold when you're stripping. Now you can actually, now I put a bit of glue on, just make sure everything's in position, then give it a quick zap with a UV torch. Now for the other side. Okay, looking good. Now for my eyes, these are just homemade shrimp eyes. And the best way to position these is actually try and stick the eye in between the chenille claws. I found this is the best way to make sure the eyes stay in place. I'm just going to check before I glue anything in that I'm happy with the position of the eyes. This one I'm just going to reposition, not quite happy with that. So those eyes are in between the claws, and this is really the trick to make sure they don't go anywhere or break off. Put a bit of super glue onto that mono and then pull it through. Now because it's in contact with the chenille, that's going nowhere. Now, as with the legs, a bit of UV glue at the base of the claws. Really, this flexible UV glue is really what you want. Normal UV glue has the same effect as super glue. Also put a little in between the claws, otherwise those are also going to fold and lose their form when the chenille is wet. Trim off the mono. For added security, to make sure the eyes don't come out, I've just left a little tag end which I singe down and then press down. So Now that's really nice and secure. Well, that's my Flexo Crab, a fantastic permit and trigger pattern. It's really revolutionised trig and permit fishing in the Seychelles, and is also a superb pattern for Atlantic permit. It's a bit of an arts and crafts project, takes a bit of time, but unfortunately it's very effective. Give it a crack.